All right, we're back. It's MAPD714 in the fall 2017 semester. That's iOS development fundamentals. We are week 2, part 2 of our broadcast, and we're talking about basic user interactions. Again, we're following that book, and I'm going to bring up the PowerPoint presentation that I have up on eCentennial right now for basic user interactions. Okay, in order for us to do this part, there are 82 slides. I'm not going to cover all 82 slides. There's just no time for that, right? But I'm going to run through the basics of how to do what we're going to be doing together. Now, notice that, again, for people who weren't here last week, and I'm figuring there's probably going to be people next week that are new too. It's going to happen. I don't know what we're going to do with these people that are coming in. There's not enough Macs for everybody in the room. I think there's only 20 Macs or something crazy like that. So that's why I really encourage you to get your own. And besides, you have more flexibility. So if you notice here, this is the book we're using. I think it's a fairly straightforward book. It's good and it's comprehensive. Next semester, we'll use another book because we need to use something more advanced than this. But we're going to run through most of the examples in this book step by step. So if you want to get a jump on it, go to the next chapter. If you have that book, if you get it, it's quite good. So what we really want to try and do is we want to write this simple application where we have some kind of label at the top. This is very basic now, right? But this is going to prepare you for your calculator, right? I got a basic label and I got a couple of buttons. Let's do that first, okay? And we're going to call this, again, you can call it basic user interactions. I'm going to call it something totally different. So again, how do we find Xcode, right? Or 4 ways. One is you're going to go to your applications, and under applications, when you downloaded Xcode on your machine, or the machine that's in front of you, you can see that there's Xcode there. That's one way. The other way is on the bottom, if you're using the school machine, I've configured it so if you click on the developer group, Xcode should be there somewhere on the bottom, right? That's the second way. The third way is searching for it. How do we search for stuff with Mac? Command space is like the easiest thing to learn. So command space Xcode. Now you don't want Xcode Serve Builder. You want just Xcode, the application. That's the one you want. So if I was to launch it from here this time, double click, double left click, you're going to see Xcode come up, and it's going to show us our last project, which is MAPD714 F2017 Hello World. And now notice, I'm just going to take us down to the other side here, and we don't need this anymore. But notice that last week, what I did was I made a folder on the desktop called Xcode Projects. I recommend for what we're doing here together, it's the fastest way to find your stuff, right? Okay, remember, we're going to put this up on GitHub, right? Again, this time, though, I want to do it manually. So I'm not going to click that GitHub button when we start Xcode, so we can do it manually for the first time, right? Now, in order for you to do this exercise today, you need to have a GitHub account. If you haven't signed up for GitHub, please go up and sign up for your GitHub account right here. Here's GitHub. Right? Remember, I'm already signed up. It won't look like this for you, right? If you haven't signed up for GitHub, sign up. I'm going to go with the incognito window so you can see what it looks like, GitHub. There is a desktop app for GitHub. There is. I don't recommend it, though, if you're using Xcode. And it looks like this, desktop.github.com. If you go to desktop.github.com, there is a desktop app that's native for both Mac and Windows, which is kind of cool. So you can actually do all your GitHub operations with a desktop app, a native app. I don't recommend it because I want you to learn, as developers, terminal. Command prompt, it's terminal. You're using a Mac, right? So how do you do that? Well, first, the smart thing to do is use Xcode to set up a project, and then we're going to go into that Xcode projects folder, and we're going to create our Git directory ourselves. Now, one thing to note, let's take a look at this Xcode projects folder right now. We should have one other subfolder, which is the last project we did, that Hello World project last week, right? Here it is, right? And do I see Git anywhere here? No, it's hidden, right? It's a hidden folder. Remember last time we talked about it, that Git, when we use Git, it creates a hidden folder. So how do I find this? Well, I want to use terminal, and I'm going to search for it. I'm going to use command space. I'm going to start typing terminal. That's one way to do it. Here's my basic terminal. Now, I don't use terminal, and for those people who have their own Macs, like I said last week, I recommend iTerm. Right? So let's go and get iTerm. I'll show you where to get it from if you have your own Mac. I probably won't be able to download it for the machine in front of you, but if you look at iTerm for Mac, right, this is where it is. Here's your iTerm, right? I think it's a slightly better terminal than what's built into Mac OS, right? I think it's better. It gives you some color for the terminal as well as some really cool features for Git. I recommend it, all right? It's something that I always use. There are some things that are different about it because it's ZSH, right? If you're familiar with Linux, then you need to do some other configuration later on for this, but it's a great little emulator, and there's nothing that stops you from using terminal if this fails. All right, so, but however, if you're not using iTerm and you're using the terminal that's built in, then it would look like you find it again by using command space and terminal. I'm going to use iTerm. So here's mine. It's asking me to install the update. Sure, while we're waiting. It's 2 seconds. That's the one thing I like about iTerm. It's a quick download and update, right? I think it's really good. Now notice what it does. It shows me my root folder. This is my root folder right here. So that's me, right? And if I do pwd, right, like we do on Linux, it's going to show me my path for my root folder, pwd, right? So users Thomas, that's me, right? By the way, my name is not Thomas, but what the heck, right? You're going to make some kind of username that's different than your own, right? And it can't be sexy legs or something like that, right? It's got to be something that makes sense in the real world, right? So it's got to be something else. So I use something that is kind of like my name, but not really my name. All right, so then this is what it looks like. Clearing the screen on Mac terminal is CLEAR, right? So clear, right? Not CLS like Windows. CLS is Windows command prompt, right? So clear. So if I type some stuff, you know, you can do clear. Now, one thing to also note is if I type clear and press enter, notice even though I pressed clear, it just took me down here, and look what it's done with iTerm. It's actually, I got my history right there. All it does is push me down, which is kind of cool. The other thing to note is if you're downloading for the other course, before we go on to the next piece, if you're downloading Node.js, right, for Victor's course, that's on Tuesdays, right? And I'm putting this up because we're talking about terminal right now. So here's Node.js. You're using the Mac. There's 2 versions for the download. One of them is the LTS version, the long-term support version. The other one is the current version. I don't recommend the current version. There's some problems sometimes. The LTS version is good, but for Mac, I don't recommend downloading it right here. Okay, so if you've downloaded Node.js for Victor's class and use Mac, bad for you, right? Why? Because you're going to have to do sudo commands all the time. Sudo, sudo, sudo. And it's a pain in the ass, right? So to avoid that, if you're going to download Node, then use Homebrew. So Homebrew for Mac, right? That's what you want to use. This way, when I do node commands in my terminal, right? Here's my terminal. And if I want to do a node command like node -v, right? Notice I'm not using the LTS version. I'm using that's why I'm telling you the current version is broken. There's some problems. I found some problems the other day with it as of this recording, right? Maybe in the future it's not going to be a problem, but the current version has I found some glitchy stuff. Maybe it was just me. But if I want to do an npm command, let's say, for example, I go to desktop. Don't do this with me. I'm just going to show you how to go to desktop. So here's my desktop, right? And if I do an ls, that lists all the things on my desktop, right? If I do pwd, it shows me the path to my desktop, the current path. That's what it does, right? This is all Linux stuff. You should know this stuff, right? If you're a Linux person. If you're not a Linux person, it's new to you, it's okay, right? But notice I have Xcode projects, right? But let's say I'm going to make another folder. I have a folder called tests, right? Here's a test folder. I'm making another folder. I'm going to clear. Make directory is how you do it, right? Make directory. And I call it, so make mkdir, make directory. And then the name of the directory, I'm going to make test2. Just to show you, I'm on the desktop. See, this is the location where I'm currently at. And I'm making a directory called test2. I made a directory. If I do an ls, you can see that there's a test do directory now. Nice and easy, right? If I clear, I'm clearing back in. Notice again, it's all, even if I clear on ZSH or iTerm, still all there, right? I can still go back. Now if I clear and if I go into the directory, if I go cd test2, right? And if I do an ls command, there's nothing. But however, if I do an ls minus al, that means I want to see all hidden stuff too, right? There's stuff in there, right? Right now, there's nothing in there. It is empty, but it's showing me some other, a different kind of view of my folder. Okay, that's all it's showing me. Let's clear that up again. So I'm in test 2. I want to download with npm for a second, just to show you what you need to do. Normally, you'd have to do sudo npm install something something, right, or sudo, right? You don't have to do that. I can just do npm init, and it's done, right? And then if I want to download something else, I'm just going to accept everything. If I want to download something else with Homebrew, with Node, let's say I want to do npm install, and I want to install Jquery, right? Right. Let's say I want to install Jquery, right? And I want to go minus save, right? With npm, I don't have to put sudo in there. It just works. Although it tells me, hey, you got a problem with your npm. I don't like this. I don't like updating npm myself. I'd rather, I mean, sometimes you get a bit of a problem. There's linking and stuff like this, but see it. I just keep going. All right, so but you can see I didn't put in any kind of sudo, right? Because sudo is super user do. That's what it does. That's what it stands for, right? Super user do. You have to put in your password, which is the password for the machine in front of you, right? And if you don't know the password for the machine in front of you, which you don't, right? Actually, you guys do, because it's like whatever the password is for you guys to go in as a student, you should be okay. But if it's admin password, it may ask you for the other password, and that's going to be a real pain in the ass for you. So please install it with Homebrew. And the way it works is, once you go here, the missing package manager for Mac OS, right? Brew SH. This is a great way. If you follow the instructions here on how to get Homebrew for your machine, this should be for your machine, okay? Not for the machine at the school, right? That would be bad if you put this in, because then you need to know the passwords, right? So this is for your machine at home. And now this is the best way to install on the Mac. So first you install Homebrew, and then you say something like this. You say, so brew SH. I'm going to put this up on Slack for us. So here's brew SH. Let's go to general, right? And the other thing to go and grab is the solution for how to install Node.js with Homebrew. So install Node.js Mac Homebrew, right? By the way, my Google foo is strong. I can search like the best of them. All right, so then if you look at this, you can see a couple links here that I've already clicked on. Install Node.js and npm on Mac from a Treehouse blog back in the day. And you can see that there is a reason for Homebrew and how to do it. They actually give you the brew install node. That's what you have to do there. And that's all you have to do, sit back and wait. And what happens is then you don't need to put in sudo anymore, right? You don't have to do that anymore. And that's really a good thing for Mac. Okay, oops. If you already have Node.js already installed because you downloaded it from the web, right? You may have to uninstall it and reinstall it. Yeah. Okay. I'm sorry about that, but you need to do that if you're doing this for the first time. So why is it like that? Because Mac is super. They protect you, right? That's what it's all about. All right. And that's what it's not a bad thing that they do it that way. Okay. Cool. So test 2. I really don't care about that. I'm just going to go back up one. I was just using that as a test folder. I'm going to just move this to trash. But let's take a look at that other folder. This one. How did I get there? How do I get to this folder on my desktop? What's the quick way of doing that? Remember, I gave you guys a quick and dirty way of getting there. How? Tab, right? But not so you go CD. That's what you do for space, and then you drag and drop this one here. That's what you do. It actually works on Windows machines as well, right? But you need to have a space between this. Okay, CD space and then drag and drop, right? And what it does, it actually takes you to that folder right away. Notice that I have this master come up on iTerm. That means that there's right at this level, there is a Git repository because it's identifying that master is the master branch. That's what it is, right? And for me to see the Git repository, even though I don't see it here, I don't see it in here on the UI view, right? I can see it here by going ls-al. I want to see all the hidden files, and look at this beauty right here, right? .git. It's a hidden folder that doesn't appear here, right? That's the Git repo, the Git repository. Okay, so first, when we're going to do the exact same thing, right? And as soon as we create our folder, I'm going to go in here manually and create the Git repository this time today, as opposed to what you asked me last time. I'm going to show you how to do it manually with terminal, all right? So you see it both ways. Why am I showing you this stuff? Because you might need it sometime, because sometimes Xcode might work a little funky and you need to fix something. You can fix it on the terminal very quickly. All right, so let's do that. Let's go back into here. I want to make a new project. Remember how we did last time? I want to create a new Xcode project, right? Just like last time. There is a group of templates we can use. There are several tabs here. So far, there's going to be other tabs next time they upgrade Xcode to Xcode 9. But for now, all we need is the iOS template, tab. And we want to click the single view application again and click Next. All right, it comes up here. Notice that my team is logged in already. If you set up your certificate properly, then your team should come up here like this. It's okay. I'm going to leave it none for now so that you guys see what I see, worst case scenario. Notice that the language is Swift, but it could be Objective-C. I'm also targeting iPhone again. I'm not checking on use core data, include unit tests, and blah, blah, blah. All right? And I'm just going to call, for me, I'm going to call this MAPD, right, 714, and then it's fall 2017, right? And the project that I'm doing is basic user, look at how long it is, interactions. Woo! Basic user interactions, right? And I make it really long like this because I can. I don't have to make a short name for the project, make it as long as I want, right? Now, here's what happens. My organization name is me, right? I could make this Centennial. Let's change it to Centennial College because we're working for Centennial here in our Brig Lab, right? Here's Centennial College. And notice my organizational identifier is reverse DNS formatting, right? So CA.Centennial College. It's reverse DNS. That's a very typical way of doing things. By the way, it'll be the exact same for Android, right? A bundle identifier, notice is a combination of your organizational identifier plus your product name, all right? So that means the chances are you won't have the bundle identifier be always different for everything you put up on the App Store. Okay, that's how they kind of come up with that. All right, cool. Let's press next. Here's where you're going to be asked to, hey, do I want to create a Git repository? I'm going to uncheck this time because I want to do this with you together, right? So I'm going to uncheck this one and press create. And again, I'm targeting Xcode projects just so you see that. All right, cool. So I've got my basic app. Here it is. I can change the display name so it shows basic user interaction. I can say that, basic user interaction. I can change the display name to that, right? That's just the display name of the app. Here's my target. I'm targeting iPhone 7. I don't want that. In this case, I want you to target iPhone 6s today. iPhone 6s. Remember what we're looking at here, right? Whenever I look at the project, I'm here, I'm clicking, my first click on the top or selection is on the project name, right? When I've clicked on this little blue icon here is really the manifest for my project. And this is the way I can build my project, build settings. I also have what capabilities does it have? Does it have access to Game Center, Wallet, Siri, whatever, right? That's capabilities. Resource tags, if I want to add any of them. Info about my bundle identifier and everything else, almost in XML format, right? Similar to Android, actually. Build settings, if I want to link and build things, just like we would do it manually with C or C++, it's all done here. I can modify my build settings here if I wanted to. build phases if I had some different kind of build phases. It's all done for you, by the way, as well as, let me just get rid of this, build rules. Now, you don't have to modify any of this stuff. I'm just showing you what these tabs are, right? And this is all inside your little manifest here, right? Let's go back to general. So general is where you start off. The version 1.0, my build is number 1. Automatically manage signing, sure. Uh-oh, there's no team, right? And notice that it says signing for this app requires a developer team if I want to deploy to a device. That's why I got you to do all that work last week, right? Without this team, you cannot deploy to a device, all right? My deployment target for now is 10.3. Let's keep it there, all right, for semester. Device iPhone, main interface is main. I'm handling portrait interactions. I don't care about landscape or landscape right for now. We can always turn those on later on. Status bar is the defaults, right? I'm not using any special app icons or embedded binaries. We might somehow have to put those in there at times. Or linked frameworks and libraries other than UIKit, the stuff that we already have built into iOS, okay? So very basic. Let's leave that as an issue, right? Cool. I'm going to, now, question would be, do I need to save anything? Well, no, there's nothing to save. We just saved this. But if I'm really crazy about it, I can try and do Command S. That's a quick hit for save, although it's not going to do anything. Notice that I also, last week, I showed you that I could pop these up and back to give me more real estate, right? When I develop. Right now, all I need is this part. I don't care so much about this part because I got nothing that I really care about on the middle, right? There's other ones we're going to explore today as well. Okay. So great, we have a project. And, well, I want to set up a Git repository. And let's go back to terminal. All right, notice that I'm in hello world. If I do an ls command, that's good. I go up one step to Xcode projects. What if you can't get there or you don't know what I did? Let's do it again. So now let's look what I got. I've got 2 projects, right? The basic user interactions project and the hello world project. And I'm going to bring up terminal and like from scratch again and go cd space and drag and drop my basic user interactions folder right here. And then press enter. Cool. Now you can see the 2 folders, but there's no Git folder, right? No Git folder. So what do I do? What's the command for me to make Git, to initialize Git in this folder? Git init, right? I'm saying it so that everyone knows it. Who doesn't know it? All right, Git init. Can everyone see that? Git init. If I press enter, it's going to initialize the repository. And take a look at this now. I have my master show up as the master branch by default. Okay, whoa. Okay, that's cool. I want to do some basic things. Here's the first thing I want to do. I want to do something called an initial commit or a first commit, all right? And I want to be able to capture all the files that are currently in use for the project. Now, luckily, Xcode does not lock any of the files it has open, right? So I can do this. So if I go to the next part, what's the next command I should do? Git add dot. Git add dot is the next command. The add verb for Git says, I want to add something to something called the staging area. All right. So before I actually do the commit, I'm telling Git which parts of my folder, which parts of my files I'm going to add to the repository, right? For this snapshot, for this commit. So git add dot and press enter. Okay, so I've staged all the files recursively from the folder that I'm in down. That's what I've done. I've staged them all. Okay. And now the next command is git commit -m for message. And I'm going to type in initial, I'm just going to go to the next line, space, initial commit. Notice also that my, one thing with iTerm is I can make it as wide as I want to make it so that you can see everything, right? And why is it so wide? Because unfortunately, what's happened is I've got a really long project name. I did this on purpose, by the way. I could have made this much smaller, like user interactions or project 2, right? But I think it's better to do it this way. Okay, cool. So git commit -m initial commit. You can say initial commit, or you can change initial to first. Those are the two basic, I would say, ways we do things, right? Conventions, basic conventions, 2 conventions, 1 first commit or initial commit, and then press enter. What you're going to see is a bunch of stuff. Now it says create mode and all this kind of stuff. Now there's a reason for all this stuff, right? Because I have Xcode open right now. And I've inserted 636 files. Where the heck are 636 files? I only just opened a project, right? Well, yeah, because the Xcode template comes with a bunch of files in the background that we don't see or deal with. Okay, are we good? Are you with me? So I'm asking because there's a couple of things. So notice the commands here. They're right here in order. Git init, that's the first command, right? And then I said git add dot. You can't see it there, but it's the next command I put in there. Git add dot, which is way over there under this part, right? Actually, I'll come back a little bit so you can see it. I think I have to even come back further than that. It's lost. Yeah, it's way over here. So git add dot, and then after that, I did a git commit -m initial commits, which did all this. So now I've made my first commit. A commit is a snapshot. I've taken a picture of my folder structure at this particular moment in time, right? And it captured everything I staged. So when I said git add dot, I staged all those files for the commit. Now you don't have to. You can only commit certain files. Typically, we commit all of them. For now, in our class, let's just commit all. We'll always do git add dot, just to make that something that we're going to do, okay? Next, I want to clear the screen, right? And I want to now, I need to make a connection with GitHub, which means I need to add a remote. Now, I don't have a GitHub repository that I've set up yet. Let's set it up. So I'm going to go up to GitHub. Now, you must have a Git account for this. And I'm going to go into my Centennial account. This is my Centennial account. This is the last application here, right? New one. I'm going to use plus. You can also click new. One of those two will be fine. Either one, right? If I click plus, I'm going to go new repository. And I got to choose my organization. I have multiple organizations. College in this case. That's where I want it to go. In your case, you will only have one. Okay? Your own name or your own account. And now the name of my GitHub repository should try and match as much as possible, right, to the name of my project. You don't have to go there, but I will, right? So MAPD714 - fall 2017 - basic user interactions. And let's see if Git takes it, and it does, right? If I press enter now, it creates the basic repo that's empty. I've got an empty repository up online, right? Empty repository. Guys, my assumption is at this point, for people who came in for the first time for today, you have a GitHub account, right? You have a GitHub account. You're able to follow along with what I'm doing. If you can't follow along with what I'm doing, please see last week's video, right? I made a whole video. I did this really quickly, but I did it last week, right? You need a bunch of stuff. You need a GitHub account. You need an Apple ID. You need these things. I can't go over that again, but I've got a video for that. Okay, so I've got this basic. Guess what? It gives me the connection. These last two lines. I'm going to cheat here. Here's my cheating. I'm going to pull these last two lines down. I'm going to Command C. So highlight these things. Command C. That's like Control C on the Windows machine, right? I'm going to switch back. How do I switch to my terminal really quickly? What's the command that I use? Command Tab, right? So I can Command Tab back and forth, right? And then I'm going to Command V and then press Enter. Now, if this is your first time on the machine, it's going to ask you to log into Git and it's going to ask you for your credentials, right? Your Git username and your Git password. It'll ask you for that for the first time. And then on a Mac, it will remember, right? On a Windows machine, if you ever try and do this, you'll have to use WinCred, right? Which is crazy. So luckily you're using a Mac and there's no issues. This is what it should look like. Okay, cool. What this has done now, notice, is that it created a new branch up on the remote. It created two things. It created a remote connection, right? A remote connection. If I just type in Git remote, if you type that in there, Git remote, and if I press enter, you can see that I have a remote called origin. That is the default name for the remote. A remote is just the connection between your local repository and GitHub. It's a connection, right? By the way, it's not always connected. The only time we make the connection is when we push up to GitHub or pull from GitHub. That's when we connect again. Notice I pushed. That was the command, the other command I copied. So first, if you look back at GitHub, the command is git remote add. So I'm adding a remote. It's going to be called origin. Here is the name of my remote based on the name of my Git repository, my Git account, and the name of my repository, sorry. And then I'm going to do this next command, git push. So I'm pushing, which means uploading to GitHub from my local remote, right? -u for unconditionally. Don't stop me. Force it up, right? To the origin remote. So push to the origin remote into the master branch. That's what it means. That's what all these things mean. Okay, so you know. Now I've recorded it, so you can always refer back to this video. I'm going to come back. I'll come back to you in the break. We'll talk about it, okay? You too? Okay, we'll talk about why it failed. All right, it's good. If it fails, that's good learnings for you. We can talk about how to fix it, all right? Now, if it didn't fail, you should see something like this, right? If I refresh, you should see that I have these two folders inside my repository here, and I have one commit. Take a look at my commit. And it says initial commit, and there's my picture on it, right? 7 minutes ago. But I pushed like a lot earlier than that, or you know, it wasn't that long ago. Well, yeah, it doesn't care about how long, when you pushed. It cares about when you made the commit. So if I committed half an hour ago and I just pushed, it's going to show half an hour ago, right? The last time I did the commit. It's not going to show me when my push time was, just the commit time. All right, so this is what this has done. Let's take a look at this again. I'm going to clear the screen, and let's do an ls-al. You can see that I've got now this hidden Git folder that I never had before, right? And I have two folders. Okay, how does Xcode know about it? Does Xcode know about anything? Right, because I did all this stuff behind the scenes, and I didn't say anything to Xcode. I didn't say, hey, Xcode, I'm doing some Git stuff in the background. Does Xcode know? Well, let's check this out. I'm going to go to my viewcontroller.swift on the left-hand side. Let's click that for the first time. And notice that I've got this extra function, did receive memory warning, and I also got this view did load method, these two methods that are part of my view controller class, which inherits from or extends, that's what this colon means in Swift, UI view controller, which comes from the library UIKit. So UIKit, if I took it away, let's comment that out for a second, then, well, there's a problem. First of all, it says, well, what's all this stuff, right? It doesn't know what all this stuff is because UI view controller comes from UIKit. So I need to import it. Import is the keyword that we use to include a library of functionality. By the way, import is the same keyword we use in C. All right, import. Okay, cool. So I imported, and notice that now everything is gone. All those errors are gone, right? But I want to get rid of all of this. I want to get rid of this function because I don't care about receiving memory warnings right now. I'm going to just get rid of it. Let's get rid of it. Okay, and let's save it. Okay, cool. But what happened? I don't get it. Look, I don't see this stuff that's going on here in my project, because if I have my project that's being managed by Git, then I should have some markings here that tell me that my source control is working. I'm just putting it out there to you so you can see it, right? However, back inside my terminal, if I do it ls, I can see that I got a little star here next to the master, which means there's been a change, right? So you see, it detected the change, even though Xcode wasn't smart enough to figure it out yet. It will, by the way, when you restart it. But you can see that here it doesn't. It doesn't know that Xcode is keeping track of Git. But now let's take a look. So if I say Git log, see that I got one commit. That shows me the commit. And by the way, see this commit number? This commit number in short form, right, is up on the web. So if I go to the web, here's the web, and look at the commit number, 522E6D7, right? Oops. 522E6D7. This part of the commit number is right there, right? Oops, I shouldn't have done that. It's there. So if I go git log again, sorry, you can see that it carries part of the commit number. And if I look on the web for a second, this commit number is actually there. It actually shows you the exact same commit number. This commit number is generated when you use Git on your machine, and it uses a hash code to take a look at the time value, your machine, GitHub, the repository name, and a bunch of other stuff to generate this unique number, which is always going to be unique, right? So my Git commit number is going to be different than yours, always, right? And every new Git commit that I make is going to mark, it's a unique identifier for that particular snapshot, right? This is great. That means that Git will always know that it's a new commit if I make it, even if it's the exact same name, right? It doesn't matter because it wasn't done at the exact same time. Okay, let's go back. Let's go back to code. If I click on code, you can see that I can come back here. Yay. All right. Pressing Q takes you out of that. If I say git status, that's the other thing I can do, git status, you can see that I'm on the master branch, right? But it also shows me that my Git file is dirty now, right? I like to call it dirty. It's a kind of a dirty file right now. Why? Because we have two full files we've modified, right? And we haven't added them to any kind of new commit, right? So I've got two files that I've modified, right? 1 and 2. This one we saw we modified, but somehow this file in the project got modified in the background, right? So there's stuff going on in the project that's happening, even though you're seeing something in front of you. In the background, there's other stuff going on that you don't know about. All right, that's why it's really good to understand this stuff. Okay, good. So I've done this one problem. All I did was remove, if I go back to Xcode, I just removed this method, right? And what I want to do is I want to document that I removed this method, right? That's all I want to do. So in my commit now, this is my commit. I'm going to click clear. And I'll say, this is my commit. I'll say git add dot, just like before. Changes. Those two files I've modified, I've just told Git that I'm gonna make a new commit with those two files, right? Now I'm going to say git commit -m, and instead of initial commit, I'm going to say removed, and I can't remember exactly what the name is. I'll just undo for a second so you can see it. Did receive memory warning, right? This part here. If you really want to be specific, I can actually do that. Copy. And paste, did receive memory warning, right? Method from viewController.swift. Now, this is a really long message, and it's not recommended, okay? But you could do this long. Now, here's the thing. You want to try and make your commit messages as small as possible, right? Because you want to see them in your commit track. I'll show you what. Now, it'll accept this. If I press Enter, it'll commit those, and it'll commit those two files, right? It'll commit those two files to the Git repository. Now, if I check out Git status, you can see that I've got two files that I've modified. This is still not clean, right? Still not clean. Those two files have been modified. Why? Because I went along after I modified it and saved it. I modified it again. Notice that, right? No, let me just ignore that for a second. Let's suppose I didn't do that, right? And then I redid, and I removed, and I copied, and I did all those other things to keep track of all those things. But let's ignore that for a second. And let's just say, okay, now I want to push this up to my remote. Git push origin, that's to the origin remote into the master branch. Now, if I wanted to push to another branch, I can do that too. For now, I'm just going to go to master and press enter. If everything goes well, it's going to take those 2 commits and put them up on GitHub. Okay, now if it failed again, you have to log in sometimes to do that if you're on a machine that doesn't know who you are, right? Let's take a look online and see what happened, right? So I'm going to refresh. Now I have 2 commits. And if you notice my 2 commits, here's that long commit that I did. That's too long, right? But notice the name, the number of my commit, F888. That's a lucky number for Chinese people, right? 888. F888, maybe not the F. But if you look at this, right, you can see that if I do a git status, I've still got 2 to do, right? But if I do a git log, I've got 2 commits. Here's my initial commit, and here's my second commit, which is this thing I made, right? And here's F888, just like we have online, right? Here's F888. But wouldn't it be nice if Xcode can detect that I've made this commit, so or that I even have a Git repository? Does even Xcode know about it? Well, if I go to source control, right, and notice that nothing comes up on source control here right now, right? Nothing comes up on source control. It normally would, right, if I had told Xcode that I'm using Git. Let's close off Xcode and reopen and see what happens. So closing off Xcode, going back to Xcode, launching that project again. Does it know now? Yes. Right? See how it has an M next to it? Because I modified that view controller by deleting and redoing it again. And if I go to source control, now it's all open again for me, yeah? So the trick is, if you do it without using Xcode, right, you need to close off Xcode and relaunch it so that it understands. It picks up the Git repository, and so that it knows that Git is there. I wish it didn't. I wish you didn't have to do that, right? In VS Code, if you make a change, it automatically knows. In Visual Studio, it automatically knows. In Android Studio, it automatically knows, but not so in Xcode, FYI, right? So you're good. I'm telling you this stuff so that you don't confuse. You're like, Tom, I don't know what happened, but I did it with the terminal, and then I can't tell. It doesn't show up on Xcode. Yeah, you need to sometimes, restart Xcode. Okay, cool. So we did this, and it shows me that I've got this modification, and we're going to modify this anyway. So let's continue with this little demo before we stop for another break, right? And we've been going for a while again, right, if you notice, right? That's how it rolls. Okay, so I've got these 2 files, right? Now, one thing I need to know, and this is in the PowerPoint presentation, is this app delegate.swift. What the heck is this, right? So view controller controls what we see in our main storyboard. My main storyboard right now is empty, right? That's what main storyboard does. Last week we did this like hello world label, right? Storyboard is connected to my view controller. That's what it does, right? But app delegate, what the heck is that? Where you can only have one UI application object every time you make an Xcode project, right? You can only have one UI application object. That's your app, right? And what your app delegate is a series of built-in methods that trigger for my application lifecycle. Okay, so the application itself has a lifecycle. Let's take a look at some of these built-in methods, and these all trigger. So my application. All right, that's interesting. That's a method, right? It could be the the initialization method, but let's just look at that. Application will resign active, and it tells you what this does. It says sent when the application is about to move from active to inactive state. In other words, when I put the application to the background, it becomes inactive. This triggers. That means I could put in some code in here for debugging to know that it went to the background. Okay. That's what this app delegate.swift is all about. It's all around the application lifecycle. All right. Here's the next one. Application did enter background. Okay. So it resigned active, entered the background. Okay, cool. Application will enter foreground. It's just about to become active again, right? Application did become active. It became active. These are all things that are triggers, right? application will terminate. I pressed the button twice and I flipped it up, right? I terminated the application manually. Because remember what they tell you in Apple, don't do that, right? Terminating applications aren't going to make your memory come back, right? They might recharge the application, but sometimes that's not the solution, right? Especially if it's not written something to do something in here, right? So it says save data if appropriate, because if you have some data, some persistent data they're using and you shut down your application, you want that data to be pushed to the persistence engine, wherever you're going to send it, right? Okay, so that's what this app delegate.swift does, right? And let's test this to see what happens. Now, how do we test stuff in Swift, right? Well, I definitely want to test this part, and let's do a series of tests. I'm going to put in print. Let's try this together. Notice that I get this. This is the first time I'm writing any Swift code. I'm getting this code hinting happening, right? It's like Microsoft's IntelliSense. That's TM, by the way, right? IntelliSense is a trademark, Microsoft, right? It's like IntelliSense, and what it does is it gives me the chance to write something to the debug window, right? That's what it does. Where's the debug window? Well, we're going to find that in a second. So print, and then some kind of message like, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy application will resign active, just the name of it, inside the quotations. Notice in Swift, I don't need semicolons. Even though it's very C-like, that's one aspect we don't. Can I write a semicolon in Swift? And for long lines of code that I want to write multiple instructions, I should use them, right? But typically, the Swift way is not to use semicolons. It's going to take a little bit of work to get used to not putting semicolons because we're all used to them, right? If you've written any kind of C, C#, JavaScript, PHP, anything except for Python maybe, right? You need to put semicolons in those, but not here. Okay, cool. Let's do the same thing. I'm going to take print, this print statement. I'm going to do the same thing for the other ones. I'm going to put it in here, and let's go and do this. Let's see what happens with the application here, right? So this one, so we know it's application did enter background. All I'm doing is printing out when the application triggers, right? That's what I want you doing here. So I'm going to kind of go in here and put that in there, and then change the name that I'm displaying, right? Copy. And paste, Command C, Command V, right? I want you guys getting used to that as well. Oh. And the last one. All right, so I've got these put in there. Guess what? I see another M appear. Solution window on the left. This is my navigator. My solution navigator is on the left-hand side here. That's what this is called. This is the navigator window, right? This is on the left-hand side. Remember, if I was going to test you, you should know these names, right? Navigator window. Inspector window, right? Editor window in the middle. Navigator window on the left, right? Okay, so navigator window on the left, you see that I have a couple of M's. These are modified files. I've modified now my app delegate.swift. Let's just run my app. I'm targeting iPhone 6s, just empty like this, and see what happens. So let's run it. It's going to compile and start launching my simulator. It's really big like this. What do I need to do here? I want to go to hardware, or is it window, and I want to scale to 50% here so you can see it. Now you might have to scale a lot more, scale even more to 33%. So I've got a big windows. This is what my app looks like right now. Okay, whoa, application did become active, triggered. Take a look. Right here. See that? All right. What about if I minimize and fool around with my application? What if I drag it around or do something? Does it do anything when I click on here? No, right? Nothing happens here. And do I have any other interactions? What about if I want to send this app to the background? Does anyone remember or know the way to do that? Command Shift H, is that closing it or is that shifting it? Right. So what if I press Command H by itself? That kind of puts it to the background. That hides the actual window. That's a Mac command, not a simulator command. But if when the simulator is open, if I press Command Shift and H, it actually it's like pressing the home button. There's no more home button on the on Xcode. On iPhone 8 or iPhone X. But this would have, now look what happened. Triggered, right? When I went to the background, these other events triggered right here. Look, application did become active. Then that's the first thing that happened. Application will resign active. Then application did enter background. All these events triggered because I put the two events triggered before I put my application to the background, right? All right, what about if I want to send my application to the foreground? Well, I got to figure out which one of these it is because I'm sorry, I can't see which one. But is it the first one? Basic user interactions. Let's take a look. So there is application will enter foreground and application did become active again. Okay, let's close off my application. How do I close my application? It's the same. If I want to close it off dramatically, how do I do it? Right? Command-Shift-Q. Are you sure? That's going to quit all applications and log me out. Are you kidding me? Command-Shift-H, right? It's going to bring up this. And I've got some other stuff in here like delegate tricks and all this other stuff that I had from before that's not going to affect anything. But when I get to my basic user interactions, just like I normally do, this swipe up for iPhones is the way we cancel or close our application. Let's try this. Application did enter background because I closed it, and application will terminate. All right, and then Command-Shift-H again, right? Now, did the app close? Yeah, notice that the start button is active again, and this stop button is stopped. It's grayed out. So these are all the things that happen. So you see, it did terminate, but before it terminated, it sent this, the app into this other action. Why? Why does Apple do this? Well, what if the user made a mistake, right? Mistakes happen, right? And I just swiped, and you have some kind of really important data. Well, you can ask the user, are you sure, right? Are you sure you want to terminate before you terminate? And if you do, then you can go ahead and terminate. Or maybe you want to save data, or maybe there's something else you want to track, right? And what if it terminates like this, as an example, without your interaction? Something you did made it terminate. You can also track that, right? So leaving these things in here isn't going to hurt you. It's going to just understand the application lifecycle. And by the way, application lifecycle doesn't matter whether there's Android, iOS, or Windows Form. Windows Form applications you make with Visual Studio, all of them have an application lifecycle with different events triggering at different parts of the application. As you bring it to the foreground, send it to the background, minimize it, maximize it, do all these different things, it'll trigger different events. Apple is that they're always listening. Some of these other listeners in other languages, they're not triggering unless you actually make the event happen. And guess what? I can get rid of some of these, but by default, the app delegate.swift has all of them. Okay, just want to put that out there to you. All right, let's go back down here. And by the way, the quick way to get rid of the bottom screen, again, notice that this is blue and not black like this. I can send it away, all right, or I can bring it back. Now it's black, not blue. If you can see that, I know it's kind of hard to see, but if you can look at that. If I want to save these changes, I want to keep track of this as we develop today. Then I have a valid change that I want to make. And now, instead of doing source control with the source control up here again again, how do I do that? Here's my source control. I want to make a commit. And I want to say I modified app delegate.swift, right? To keep track of, I'll make it really long again, app lifecycle. Oh yeah, I make real long changes, which is way too long, okay? Now I don't have to do this. I can actually have multiple messages here. Like for example, I can put this on different lines, and this is actually okay too. Why is this okay? Because you're going to only see this, but this is going to be actually in the description. So this is okay to do as well. Notice I can commit 3 files here, or I can commit and push automatically on the right, right? Commit and push. So I commit and push here by checking this check mark. If I do that, it's going to ask me to log in for the first time only. It should only ask me one time. And I have to register myself with my right and the password if I can remember it correctly. And then after I've done this the one time, it should remember my credentials and it shouldn't ask me again. Now let's check GitHub and see where we're at. All right, if I refresh, you can see that I have this message, modified app delegate, but I also have this little ellipses here. And if I want to, I can see this other part of the message. And my friends, this is okay to do because you want to keep it really short like this. This, no good. This is how it should be. Right? Nice and short and sweet with additional details down here. Okay. Right. Lots of GitHub today. And I'm telling you this only because it's important, right? We need to be able to track things in this way, right? Okay, cool. Let's on the main storyboard now. What I want you to do, and again, I'm just following the actions. By the way, on the bottom, let's take a look at this now. So I've got this blue, this black. I don't have enough real estate. I can scroll to the right and left here in my storyboard. I have this outliner, just to remind you, where I have the top layout guide, that's up here, right? The bottom layout guide, that's way down here. The view, which is this whole container right here, that's what it's called, right? I have my first responder. I have my exit, which is right here. And I have my storyboard entry point, which is right here. So these are all the things that I can look at on the outliner. I also have my view controller scene. Notice on the right, some weird stuff is happening now, right? Remember, this is the inspector window, right? So anything I click on the left here, I have a contextual window pop up with some details on the right, right? So here's my top layer guide, nothing. My view, there's some stuff here. Scale to fit for my content mode. I could also change this to other things. Please don't, but I have options. I could change other things in here, right? Also the tint, the background, if I want to change the background to something else, I could. I'm targeting the view. The view is the default container, the parent container of all other controls that are going to go inside my application. I have to fix you because you moved from one place to the other, right? Last week? Or were you there last week again? Right. Get them back. Sorry. So I'll fix you in a second. So now if you notice, I want to drag a couple of controls here and I want to put them inside the view, right? So the easy way to do that is to go to the bottom here in the library, and I want to grab a couple things. I want to grab a label to put on the top, right? And I want to get two buttons, left and right. Let's get the label first. I'm going to say label. By the way, this is not the way it's done inside the PowerPoint, but that's okay. Check the label and put it on the bottom. I'm going to use these guides here, these little these dotted lines here, or dashed lines, until it's at the top, like this. This is just below the battery symbol. See the battery? This is the actual, the battery and the carrier line is going to come up here, right? So I don't want to put it above that because it'd be kind of weird. But so this is okay. This is the label. And then I want to find buttons. Let's go and find some buttons. So there's buttons. Oops. Label in. Button. I'll be okay. Here's some buttons. And let's drag some of these buttons. And I want to put one on the left. And now, instead of doing this, let's do one button. And I'll show you a quick way to copy it for the other one. Inside here, right, notice that on the right, I have some contextual menu for the button. On the right, the button is called button. Let's change this to left. Okay, there's left. Let's also change the font size. Here's the font size. Let's change the font size to make it bigger. All right. Let's make it something like 20. So really big. And let's say I made some changes. I made the actual button bigger. So I want the button to actually be a little bigger, a bigger hitbox, right? That's what I want the button to be like. So just from a dimensions, if you want to match what I've done, how do you find out how big my button is instead of by using my eye? Using the eye is not so great, right? So how do I align? How do I know how big this button is. Well, there's other controls here, right? Look at this little ruler over here. If I click the ruler, right, it tells me a couple things. What my button content inserts is like, and also my view, where my X and Y coordinates are in absolute coordinates on my view, as well as the button width and the button height. Notice it's not exactly square. I've eyeballed it, so I'm using my eyes to figure out how big it is, but the button is a little bit small for me. I want to make it at least 60 by 60. Let's modify that button so it's exactly 60 by 60. You can do the exact numbers here. It's not that difficult to do. You can also modify the button so that it is exactly centered in the right place, right? Because you want to put it, again, kind of in the middle of the row. So 60 by 60, my X axis, if you follow what I'm doing, is 16. My Y is 303. This is where the left button is. Okay, I've done some changes for the button. Yay. I don't want to do all that again. How do I copy that without killing myself? Well, if you press Option, hold the Option key down, and drag the button, I actually make a copy immediately. And I can drag it all the way to the right. Let me just undo that and show you again. So I take the button, I leave my hand on the Option key, and I press down on the Option key, and I hold it. While I drag the button away like this, I get something like this. And now I have two buttons. And this left button. Both of them are the same size, 60 by 60, except when I click on the middle one, I want to change the name. What's the other way to get the name changed in here? How do I change the label inside? Double click, right? If I double click, I can change this label to right. And now I have two buttons and a label. Let me fix you while we're waiting. So do apologize. Oh, I know why you have to bring that up again, because you brought up a different simulator. Okay, is everyone with me? I'm going slow, guys, all right, and girls, please. I'm not trying to go fast here, but there's stuff missing, right? Remember we did this last week. Whenever you do this stuff, whenever I ask you to do something like for next week, for your lab, for the calculator, which is due next week, right? I'm just telling you right now. The first thing we need to do is which part? Not the logic, the user interface. I want you to finish the user interface first before doing any logic, right? Why is that? That's half the work right there. Once I have my user interface, I can play with the logic, right? I want to get this piece first so it looks okay and it's balanced. I need to add constraints, right? And there's some buttons on the bottom, okay? There's some buttons on the bottom. For example, I want to add some constraints for this one. Notice on the bottom, I have these buttons. This is called stack view. Okay, we're not going to use this. This embed a stack view. This one here is align. I can align this button different places. This one here is add new constraints manually. And this one here is resolve auto layout issues. All right, well, notice if I run this app right now, the way it is, let's just run the app, okay? I'm running it, same target. Do I see everything right now? That's the question. And if I look at simulator, I see everything. Yay, it runs. I'm fantastic. I feel great. Don't be fooled by this, right? Because the problem with this is that I haven't really aligned this in any way, right? It's kind of tried to figure out where everything is. Now I have multiple things. And one thing I did earlier was I dragged, but notice on the left, there's no constraints. We need to put some constraints for us to deal with different device sizes, all right? So we need to put some stuff. Now, one thing you could do is, if I say resolve auto constraints, there's two parts to this. There's the top window here, right? And there's the bottom part of the window here. The top part, this part here, before this line, see there's a little line here? I know it's hard to see here, but there's a little line that separates the top from the bottom. They almost look exactly the same, right? With the actual view that I have selected. Remember, each of the controls that I put on the storyboard are called views, each of the controls. right? There's the view. Notice I have a view and I have a label view and the button view and another button view, right? That's what they're labeled, right? And if I click on these things, if I click on all these things, you can see that I can activate each of the views inside of my, main view, which is this thing right here. So that's what I can do here. Let me just zoom in here so you can see that again a little bit more clearly. So wherever I click, so here's my view. Wherever I click here, right, I can actually activate these views, whether they're visible to my user or not. If they're here, I can click them. This is the outliner, right? Okay, great. Can I double click here and rename this view something else? No. How about in here? Can I rename this view something else over here, right? Well, I got my text, but I really don't have control to do that right here. Let's talk about these buttons up here. This one, if I click on this one, actually gives me some information. This is the documentation one, right? This one gives me some information as well. Those two. This is the, if you know, hover over, this show the file inspector. This should show the quick help inspector. This is the inspector window, right? This one, if I hover over it, shows the identity inspector. So here's my identity. How about that one? Does that tell me what it is? Does this show anything here that shows my identity? Not really, right? How about this one? This is the, if I hover over, this is the attributes inspector. So my attributes are properties, if you will, of this particular view, right? This is where I do some measurements, right? And you can see because it's a ruler, this is the size inspector. So I can actually put in numeric sizes for everything. And this is my events. Now I call it the event inspector, but actually it's the connections. So if I have an event, a connection tied to this particular view, it's going to show up here on the last one. Notice that these are all the different kinds of events that this button can be associated with. So far, if you look at them, none of them are active. And if you see that these little empty circles here, that means there's nothing that's active. If you had a plus in the circle instead, and some kind of description here, you would see that this event might be tied to an action or an outlet. Okay, so label, left button, right button, and no constraints. Let's go back to this. So if I want to type here, I'm only talking about this one, but down here, I can clear constraints. That's what I can do. And I can also go to my auto constraints and go reset to suggested constraints. Once I do that, I get a bunch of blue lines, right? And notice I need at least 2 constraints for each of my objects. Each of my controls on the screen need at least 2 constraints, typically, right? However, my label didn't get one, right? My left and right buttons got one. But this is why, because I have a constraint for my left that goes up and down. So I've kind of satisfied this thing, which gives an idea that my left is the anchor for my right. That's what it is. And I have a constraint from my left to the top of my bar. So from here to the toolbar, this is the toolbar here. From here to the top of my phone. From here to the bottom of my phone. But what about my little poor label here? It's got nothing, right? Well, until I click it, right? Then it shows this as a constraint too. If I want to view my constraints, I can see that. And it's hard to see here, right? Well, you can see that there's some, I can add a constraint manually with this little button right here. So this one here, this little square button right here, I can add constraints manually. This one does resolve auto constraints. And if I want to reset the suggested constraints for this one, I click up here. If I want to do it for all of them, I click down here. Notice there's nothing that I need to do there. Okay, let's see if I've got a problem. If I run this now, can I still see my simulator pop up with everything, all the buttons in here? Let's see. Or are they blank? Are they gone? Right? Well, this is a good news. And I don't have an error up here. Okay, let's get rid of the constraints and see what happens again. Stop. Constraints in iOS is the #1 problem when it comes to UI issues. When we start happening. If you don't understand constraints, it'll kill you. You'll set some buttons up and you don't see some buttons again. You're like, what the heck? What happened? Because your constraints are messed up, right? So how do I fix this? Again, I want to get rid of them. Can I get rid of them? If I click over here, I can't seem to click on these things, right? Each individual one I can, though. Each individual constraint for each one of these. These are all the constraints that were automatically added. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 constraints for 3 objects, right? Hey, what does Android do? Do you need any constraints for Android? Hell no. Drag and drop, put it into some kind of layout, and you're good to go, right? Not so with iOS, right? And this is another one of those crazy things that people hate when it comes to iOS development. I'm putting it out there. Don't hate it. There's a reason for it. Apple wants to be very specific, so it's forward compatible with any other viewports in the future. We don't know what new viewports are going to come out. Apple's really thought this through and tried to think about how do we make these constraints come out. I'm going to give you another exercise another day, not now, but for advanced constraints. I'm going to give you some stuff and say, make the constraints work, right? And don't use auto constraints. Make them manually, right? And you'll see how much of a pain that is, right? But I want to show you that so you understand the process. Okay, not today. So today we've got these constraints going on, and what if I don't like them? I can go to this button here again, right? So again, I have to be stopped. I have to be at least on the view itself. I can click on this. I can go back down here and clear my constraints. This removes all the constraints. If I run this thing again, the way it is, to see what happens, I may or may not, because there might be some ambiguous buttons here, I may or may not see what I want to see, especially when I look at a different simulator. Like right now, I'm looking at iPhone 6s. If I move this to some other iPhone, I may or may not see the right thing here. Constraints in place. So worst case scenario, right? I believe it's Command, Option, Shift, equals, or something like that. Let's try this out. Shift, Command, Option, equals. And if I do that, did I do it? No, I did not. Nope. What is it again? It's Editor, Resolve Auto Layout Issues, Option, Shift, Command. I did right. Option, Shift, Command. Option, Shift, Command. Option, Shift, Command equals. Now I have to have one of these selected, right? Option, Shift, Command equals. And what it'll do is it'll add all the constraints for this one, right? If I want to do for this one, right? Option, Shift, Command equals, then it'll add the constraints for that one. And if I want to add this one, I don't have to. Option, Shift, Command equals, it'll add the constraints for that one. Now, if there's any other issues, it'll come up here in a little problem. Let's see if this runs. What it does now if I just did it manually, because I did it all manually, right? Again, it's important to understand what's happening. We're still good. So depending on how many you put in. Now, this is okay for a single view. We're going to get into multiple views right now. Don't worry about that. That's why I said maybe orientation changes. We're not orientating this thing in different ways to see what it looks like. Okay, what happens if I take this thing, I go to my hardware, and I rotate left? I can simulate that, right? Oh, man. What happened? How come it didn't shift? Because in my manifest, I specifically told it that I don't want to shift it landscape left or landscape right. And so because I told it that, when I go back to my simulator, it stayed as is. It doesn't care about the accelerometer. When I move it around, it doesn't care because I told it not to. Okay? If I go back, if I rotate to the right, it's okay. And then if I press stop, it'll stop my example. Cool, I've got my user interface. Let's take a short break, and when we come back, I'll make it work.